For some reason, this Turning Point USA video was suggested in my YouTube thing. For whatever reason, I don't subscribe to Turning Point USA. As you can tell, I'm not subscribed to it. I honestly don't even know what it is until I started looking it up. But apparently, Whoopi Goldberg called them white supremacists. And this young lady here is going to whine about Whoopi Goldberg and her statements about the Holocaust, how it was not race-based but hate-based. And I'm going to, again, people know I made a video in defense of Whoopi Goldberg. That will be linked in the description. And I'm going to show once more, Whoopi Goldberg is not exactly wrong, okay? And people go, well, you must like Whoopi Goldberg. I don't like Whoopi Goldberg, okay? I don't hate Whoopi Goldberg. I'm not a fan of Whoopi Goldberg. I honestly don't think one way or another about Whoopi Goldberg. I don't watch The View. I haven't seen any of her movies. I think she did stand-up, but I never saw any of it. I don't really know anything about Whoopi Goldberg, except what I do know about, though, is I do know about the Holocaust, and I do know about history, and I do know about current events to a degree, although I don't really stay up to date like I used to, because I really don't care as much as I used to. But what I want to point out is this young lady, she's wrong, and once more, Whoopi Goldberg is right, and this will be part 2 in defense of Whoopi Goldberg. But let's let this young lady speak. I'm not going to be that nasty to her. I think that she is just overly amped because she's high on Trumpism, and she's probably a little bit Trumptarded, so we're going to let her finish.
Seem to recall that just a few months ago, Whoopi Goldberg was suspended from her seat on The View for trying to make the asinine argument that the Holocaust wasn't about race. The Holocaust?
I'm going to show you with Auschwitz.org's own information that the Holocaust was about, I shouldn't say it wasn't about race, but it was about far more than race. And also what you have to keep in mind is the group of individuals that were being persecuted, it was based on religious grounds and political ideology. I will show that. I will show that through Auschwitz.org. Okay, so let's go.
Holocaust isn't about race.
Okay, so let me get this straight. The single most racially motivated, deadly genocide in human history was...
It wasn't racially motivated. It was ideologically motivated, politically motivated. It was not racially motivated, which she would know if she actually looked into it instead of just believing, you know, what was taught to her in school and actually examined a little deeper and actually looked at what was actually being stated in these things and what the historical policies were and things like this. It was not racially motivated. The concentration camps were prison camps, and I'm going to show that.
Not about race, but a Turning Point USA conference with 5,000 young high school and college conservatives is somehow all about race because...
Okay, I don't believe she said it was all about race, but you will see how Turning Point USA put racialists in touch with politicians. Mind you, I'm essentially a racialist, okay? I agree. I'm an American identitarian, okay? There are people at Turning Point USA that probably agree with me on American identitarianism, okay? That doesn't mean that Whoopi Goldberg is wrong or that Whoopi Goldberg deserves to be chastised for stating facts.
Even after they vehemently condemned random people standing outside on public property sidewalks waving Nazi flags. Conservatism somehow metaphorically embraces Nazi ideology.
You let them in and you knew what they were. Right. So you are complicit. My point was more metaphorical.
A great deal of people in the Trumpism did actually and do actually embrace Nazi ideology. It's called, well, what they claim to be Nazi ideology. It's not Nazi ideology. Essentially, it's stone cold racism. It's not, and I want to be very clear on this. It's not Nazism per se. They don't understand National Socialist policies. They don't understand third positionism. But a lot of the Trumpers and a lot of the people that embrace Trump embrace stone cold racism. And Turning Point USA put some of those in touch with politicians. But let's go forward.
Oracle, that you embrace them at your thing.
Shame on you. Not just for being intellectually lazy, which is bad enough, but for just straight up lying.
Even if Whoopi Goldberg is being intellectually lazy, she's not wrong, and she's not straight up lying.
About an entire generation of young freethinkers in America. No wonder hashtag...
I love how conservatives think they're free thinkers because they regurgitate the other side without thinking. If they were regurgitating liberalism, they wouldn't be free thinkers. But because they're regurgitating nonsense conservatism, that somehow makes them free thinkers. You are not a free thinker. You are a moron. You are a moron regurgitating the nonsense of the other side instead of thinking. If you were a free thinker, you would not be regurgitating conservatism. You would be regurgitating your own thoughts. Not regurgitating. You would be speaking your own thoughts clearly. You are not speaking your own thoughts. You are speaking someone else's thoughts. That's why you're appearing in a video for Turning Point USA as opposed to your own YouTube video. Okay? So that's important to understand. This is not your thoughts. This is Turning Point USA's thoughts that you're regurgitating. And I'm sure they probably made you think that they were your thoughts. They're not your thoughts. These are the thoughts of basically a fricking organization that is an extremist capitalist group, essentially.
Sue the View is trending all over the internet. Anyone else seem to recall that just a few months ago, Whoopi Goldberg...
Now, I want to be clear that people understand this. This is from Auschwitz.org. This is the website of Auschwitz. This is the Museum of Auschwitz. This is what they say. So these are the groups put into Auschwitz. And I also have other concentration camps and the National Socialist concentration camp policies that I will be going over. So you can see that this was ideologically driven. Yes, there were some aspects that fell under racial ideology, but that was not what drove this, okay? This was to silence opposition, okay? Similar to the Gulag system in the Soviet Union, how it did put dangerous prisoners, as well as other people, into the gulags, but it was also primarily used, or not even primarily used, but used to silence opposition. So there were Jews in Auschwitz, there were Poles in Auschwitz. There were gypsies in Auschwitz. There were Soviet prisoners of war put in Auschwitz. There were Jehovah's Witnesses put in Auschwitz. And there were other ethnic groups put in Auschwitz. Okay? So, and also there were homosexuals put in Auschwitz. And I'll cover that later too. So, what race, might I ask, are homosexuals? Are they a specific race? What about Jehovah's Witnesses? What race are Jehovah's Witnesses? Sounds to me more like this was to put prisoners, okay, Russian POWs that were Slavic or could be Mongolian or etc. What race were they? So you have multiracial people. Number one, most of the Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany were probably German. Just putting that out there. Most of the homosexuals in Germany, probably German. So their race was probably the same as the people that were putting them in the camps themselves. So this is the prisoners of the camps in Auschwitz. Okay, the Jews, of course, were the main target, and they were put into forced labor in concentration camps. Okay, also, now look, political prisoners. So the thing is, the Holocaust involved more than race, and if you really examine it, race was an afterthought to silencing the opposition. If you read a certain book by a certain author, okay, what you will find is his hatred of the Jewish people was not racially motivated. It was motivated by a hatred of what he considered anti-German sentiment, anti-German actions, pro-communism ideas, things of that nature. It was not motivated by a hatred of these people based on race. That came secondary. And in fact, what I will show you is many of those people were made into what were called honorary Aryans. Okay? So, what's an honorary Aryan? Well, I'll cover that later. But let's look at the people that were put into these camps. Political prisoners such as communists, socialists, trade unionists, they had to wear red triangles. Common criminals wore green. Roma and others the Germans considered asocial or shiftless wore black triangles. Jehovah's Witnesses wore purple triangles, and homosexuals, pink letters indicated nationality. For example, P stood for Polish, SU for Soviet Union, F for French. Captured Soviet soldiers worked as forced laborers, and many of these prisoners of war died because they were executed or badly mistreated by the Germans. In all, over 3 million died at the hands of the Germans. Okay? 3 million, which included who? Political prisoners such as communists, socialists, and trade unionists. Many communists, socialists, and trade unionists were German. Okay? Of the approximate 23,000 Roma and Sinti gypsies who were inmates of Auschwitz, about 21,000 died or were killed there. Romani men, women, and children were confined together in a separate camp. So Romani men, women, and children were separated. So the men were kept in one camp and the women and children in another. On the night of August 2nd, 1944, a large group of Roma was gassed in the destruction of the Gypsy family camp. Nearly 3,000 Roma were murdered, including most of the women and children. Now, they didn't consider the Roma to be a different race. They were considered to be shiftless. Okay? They were considered asocial or shiftless and wore black triangles. They were a different category of prisoners. Okay? This person was a church dissident leader arrested. So this was Martin Niemöller, one of the main opponents of supposed racial ideology in the Lutheran Church. So that has to do with him opposing positive Christianity, what they called positive Christianity. Okay? And one of the founders of the oppositional confessional church, he was arrested. He was sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp in 1938 and spent the next 7 years in concentration camps. After the war, Niemöller's condemnation of bystanders to Nazi policies will become a call to early action. His words, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out." Now, this is similar to what's going on now, and this is similar to what, ironically, what people like me have said when, like we said back in the 90s, once they silence us, my group of people, then they're going to silence the conservatives, then they're going to come for the police, and then they're going to silence everybody that opposes them. That's what my group of people, I'm not going to say what group of people that was, but that's what we were saying, and it sounds an awful lot like what this gentleman was saying. And when I worked in mental health, I kept pointing that out, that we're on a slippery slope in this country where we start condemning people and locking people up for their opinions, such as Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg is being persecuted for her opinions. Whoopi Goldberg is being persecuted for her ideas. Whoopi Goldberg is being persecuted for speaking her mind. That is not the kind of country I want to live in. That is a country more similar to National Socialist Germany or the Soviet Union. Okay, so this gentleman, this Niemöller, or Mueller, said first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. Okay, German High Command orders killing of Soviet commissars. Okay, so what race were they? Oh, that's right, they could have been multiracial, but most likely were Slavic. Okay, Gypsy Camp liquidated in 1944. Okay, so you see, and they were not considered a different race, they were considered asocial. So this has to do with the people that they persecuted. Okay, this has to do with the Holocaust. Okay, victims of persecution. Okay, among the first victims of persecution in National Socialist Germany were political opponents, primarily communists, Social Democrats, and trade unionists. Jehovah's Witnesses refused to serve in the German army or take an oath of obedience to Adolf Hitler and consequently were also targeted. The Nazis harassed German male homosexuals whose sexual orientation was considered a hindrance to the expansion of the German population. Habitual homosexuals were incarcerated in prisons. Okay, so remember that word, habitual, meaning not all homosexuals, but those that were habitual. Many were later remanded to concentration camps following the completion of their sentences, meaning they didn't want to add them back into society, so they put them in the concentration camp. Nazis persecuted those they considered to be racially inferior. Now, what I find interesting here is they're not mentioning the handicap. You have to understand, what they meant by racial hygiene also meant thousands upon thousands upon thousands of mental and physical handicapped people that were liquidated. So the Nazis persecuted those they considered to be racially inferior. Nazi racial ideology primarily vilified the Jews. Now what you have to understand, their racial ideology, not necessarily based in science. You can't just decide this race or that race. And Ashkenazi Jews are a subgrouping of the Caucasoid race. So as Caucasoids, they are, anthropologically speaking, biologically speaking, the same racial group as the Germans. Understand what I'm saying? They're the same race. Okay? The Nazis viewed Poles and other Slavs as inferior and slated them for subjugation, forced labor, and sometimes death. Jewish prisoners received the most brutal treatment in the concentration camps. Identifying the prisoners, sewn onto their prison uniforms a perversion of the Jewish Star of David symbol after 1939 with some variation. From camp to camp, the categories of prisoners were easily identified by a marking system combining a colored inverted triangle with lettering. The badges sewn onto prisoner uniforms enabled SS guards to identify the alleged grounds for incarceration. Okay, chart for prisoner markings. Here you go. This is an example. Unfortunately, it's in German and I can't read German. So this is for a chart of prisoner markings. A chart for, critical thinking. Why did the SS have a system of badging and identification within the camps if anyone was a prisoner? How do badges and numbers dehumanize individuals? Ask yourself that. Criminals were marked with green inverted triangles. So criminals, now what race is a criminal? They could be any race, couldn't they? A criminal could be any race. What race were political prisoners? They could be any race. What race were asocials, meaning antisocial personalities, which included the Roma, the nonconformists, the vagrants, and other groups? And they were marked with a black, or in the case of the Roma, in some camps, brown triangles. Homosexuals were identified with pink triangles and Jehovah's Witnesses with purple ones. Non-German prisoners were identified by the first letter of the German name for their home country. See? Non-German prisoners that were of the same race or similar enough meaning that they were European, they were identified with the first letters of their nation. The Nazis required Jews to wear the yellow Star of David, not only in camps but throughout most of occupied Europe. What I would like to point out, I think people can figure this out quite quickly. If the Jews were indeed a separate race and were phenotypically unique, would they have to identify themselves with the Star of David at all? Think about that. If they were phenotypically unique, meaning that they actually looked different, would they have to wear a yellow Star of David? Probably not. You would be able to look at them and see that they were what they were. So this is again from Auschwitz.org. This is a breakdown of the religious denominations that were in Auschwitz. Okay, so let's look here. Almost 32,000 of the prisoners in the death books are listed as Roman Catholics, 2.5 thousand as Eastern Orthodox. Now, what race is a Roman Catholic? They could be any race. 2.5 thousand as Eastern Orthodox, almost 2.3 thousand as Protestant, and over 1,000 as Greek Catholic. There are also 5 Muslims. The field for, and remember, the German government was allied with a lot of Muslim countries, so they were probably not being persecuted for being Islamist, but something else. Okay? So you have to understand that too, but you have to understand these people are not of the same race. So the grounds for this persecution is not racial. Do you understand that? That's what I'm trying to explain here. It's ideological. And as Whoopi Goldberg said, it's driven by, quote, hate. Okay? The field for religious denomination is blank in 184 cases. In 116 cases, it reads denomination unknown. In 39 cases, it reads believes in God. And in 1,000, meaning that they believe in God but don't have a specific religion. And in 1,277, non-believers. Okay? In Setkowitz also found information in the death books about 2 Buddhist prisoners, 2 Hussites, I don't know what that is, I'd have to look that up, and 295 members of the Czech Moravian Church. The books also record the deaths of about 30,000 adherents of Judaism. Okay. The death books, therefore, mention almost 40,000 people of non-Jewish denomination. The death books, therefore, mention almost 40,000 people of non-Jewish denomination. Of these non-Jewish people, 80.4% are Catholic, 6.1% are Eastern Orthodox, 5.8% are Protestant, 2.7% are Greek Catholic, meaning Greek Orthodox. The other 2,000 or so people represent almost 4.9% of the entries in the death books. Okay? These data can be used to estimate the number of prisoners of non-Jewish denominations. However, he cautions that the true figure for Catholics would be somewhat higher, reflecting the deportations from Warsaw during the uprising there. The Germans deported about 13,000 inhabitants of the Polish capital to Auschwitz in August and September, so that's a lot of Catholics. It should also be remembered that the information for the death books omits 7 months of 1940 and the first half of 1941, when the prisoners were almost exclusively Polish. Okay, so from 1940 to 1941, the prisoners were almost exclusively Polish. Estimates should also take account of several thousand prisoners from the Soviet Union, along with Soviet POWs. Estimated breakdown of religions: 165,000 Catholics, 12.3 thousand Eastern Orthodox, 11.6 thousand Protestants, 5.5 thousand Greek Catholics, and at least 9.7 thousand people of other or no religious denomination. This later category also includes 58 Muslims, information on whom, including denomination, is found in the files of Soviet POWs. There are files on about 7,500 people, 7,500 of the 12,500 Soviet POWs, and most of these, the denomination space is left blank, probably because they were atheist. The one group whose numbers are known precisely is the Jehovah's Witnesses. Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum staff member Teresa Wantor-Sici has carried out research on them. She writes in her book, Wazini Zab, whatever, Imprisoned for Their Faith, that at least 387 Jehovah's Witnesses were held in Auschwitz during its 5 years of existence. Now, I hope what I've shown explains that the Holocaust and the concentration camp system as a whole was used to persecute people for political views, openness of opinion, nonconformity, and various other things. Okay? So, it was not solely racially based. Also, what you need to know is that Jewish people are Caucasian, especially Ashkenazi Jewish people. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead of myself. Give me 1 second here. So I wanted to talk about the concept of honorary Aryans. I had to skip ahead so it didn't include any nasty symbolism that would get my video banned. But the prevalent explanation as to why the status of honorary Aryan was bestowed by them upon other non-Aryan peoples is relatively vague, but was mostly explained that the services of those people were deemed valuable to the German economy, the war effort, or simply for other purely political or propaganda reasons. The independent state of Croatia, a client country, this term was used by Ante Pavlak to protect from persecution some Jews who had been useful to the state, meaning they were considered honorary Aryans. Notable inclusions declared that the Chinese and Japanese people were honorary Aryans. He spoke incredibly highly of both cultures, saying in 1936, "I have never regarded the Chinese or Japanese as being inferior to ourselves. They belong to ancient civilizations, and I admit freely that their past history is superior to our own. There was extensive cooperation between China and Germany from 1926, but became untenable when the Second Sino-Japanese War broke out, and Japan insisted on cessation," meaning that Japan, who was allied with Germany and was a very good ally of Germany, insisted that Germany break from their allegiance with China. Germany signed the tripartite pact along with Japan and Italy at the end of 1940. In July 1941, it officially recognized Wang Jingwei's puppet government in Nanking. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, China formally joined the Allies and declared war on Germany on December 9th, 1941. In retaliation, the Germans persecuted ethnic Chinese in Germany. Okay, retaliation to them betraying Germany, but not on race, as they were already considered honorary Aryans. Helmuth Wilberg, a Luftwaffe general and first-degree Mischling, meaning of mixed descendants of both Jewish and German, was declared to be Aryan in 1935 at the instigation of Hermann Göring. Amin al-Husseini, a Palestinian and Mufti of the British Mandate of Palestine, was granted the status of honorary Aryan. Okay. The Stephanie von Hohenlohe, a Jewish Austrian princess by marriage and spy for Germany, was declared an honorary Aryan by Heinrich Himmler. Emil Maurice, first personal chauffeur and bodyguard, he was the bodyguard of him, was a member of the SS but ran afoul of Heinrich Himmler's rules, which required SS men to have deep Aryan ancestry. Since Maurice's great-grandfather was Jewish, Himmler considered him a security risk, and he tried to have him thrown out, but the Big H stood by his old friend, and in a secret letter dated August 31st, 1935, he required Himmler to allow Maurice and his brothers to remain in the SS. They were considered to be honorary Aryans. Sophie Lahar, the wife of the composer Franz Lahar, had been Jewish before her conversion to Catholicism. Mind you, this is a religious view here. She was Jewish before her conversion to Catholicism upon her marriage, and he enjoyed Lahar's music and made some propaganda use of it. Goebbels intervened on Lahar's behalf. Mrs. Lahar was given in 1938 the status of honorary Aryan by marriage. Okay? Helene Mayer, a German-born fencer, being forced to leave Germany in 1935 and resettled in the United States because she was Jewish, took part as an honorary Aryan at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, where she won the silver medal for Germany. So I wanted to talk about Turning Point USA's ties to extremists that brought extremists and politicians together. As I said, as an American identitarian, I myself am an American identitarian. I am not on the far right politically. I am a progressive. I am a Roosevelt-style progressive, and I am an American identitarian. You can look up what that is if you wish. I'm not going to say what it is. People can look it up. But far-right extremists, some with white nationalist beliefs, converged and met with politicians from across the country and state at the Turning Point USA's America Fest, just before Christmas in downtown Phoenix for 4 days. Turning Point, which is headquartered in Phoenix, is a right-leaning organization that aims to mobilize young conservatives, primarily on college campuses, but the weeks... Now, I want to point this out. People that are young think that conservatism is all about how much money we can put in our pockets. Now, when I was a conservative, okay? I guess I would be considered a Pat Buchanan-style conservative. But if you look at people like Pat Buchanan, Ann Coulter, Francis Yockey, you need to understand that race is going to come up. Okay, if you're a conservative, race will come up. Because the concept of conservatism is the preservation of Americanism and the American identity. Okay, and the American identity is, to a conservative, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant identity. That is not what it is anymore. Conservatism is not conservatism anymore. Conservatism has become an ideology of capitalism, which true conservatism is not capitalist. True conservatism is economically nationalist, not capitalist. Okay? People confuse this because conservatism has been taken over by capitalists. Okay? That's not really the case. Conservatism is generally a protectionist ideology to the most part. At least there's strings attached to who we trade with and things like that. The idea of free market capitalism is a new concept, more so familiar with Reaganomics or later than it is conservatism. Also, what you have to keep in mind, conservatism is not something from the GOP. Conservatism, both parties had their conservatives and still do. Joe Biden was a conservative Democrat for many years. Bill Clinton, of course, would be considered a conservative Democrat. Hillary Clinton would be considered a conservative Democrat. Hillary Clinton is also famous for explaining that marriage is between a man and a woman, which is something that Donald Trump did not explain. So, let's see. The major draw at the event was Kyle Rittenhouse, the acquitted shooter from Kenosha, Wisconsin, who has received an outpouring of support from student conservative groups. Now, this is what I think is funny. I have nothing against Kyle Rittenhouse. I think he acted in self-defense. However, he was not a good person. He was just a kid that was somewhere he shouldn't have been, where people tried to kill him, and he acted in self-defense. Okay? I don't doubt that he acted in self-defense, and I don't doubt that the people that were trying to kill him were worse than him. But that does not make him a good person. He was a troubled youth. He had to be homeschooled. He was obsessed with violent video games. Typical alt-right nonsense, okay? The event ended up becoming a major way for influencers from more extreme ideologies within the far right to meet and interact with local and national politicians. One of those controversial figures was Grayson Arnold, who has used his social media pages to post memes lauding Nazis as the, quote, pure race, and lament the American victory in World War II. He also called, now what's funny is, people got on my case for stating what I stated about that 100-year-old World War II veteran, remember? But I guess they'd be okay with this guy, okay? And lamented the American victory in World War II. He also called that dude a complicated historical figure. And in one Instagram post provided to the Arizona Mirror by independent extremism researcher Arizona Right Wing Watch, Arnold posted the logo of Stormfront, the first major hate site on the internet that was founded by Don Black, the former leader of the Alabama Ku Klux Klan. The logo is the Celtic cross, a common white supremacist symbol, emblazoned with the words, "White Pride Worldwide." God is on our side because our fight is righteous, he declared. Arnold was photographed alongside Arizona GOP chairwoman Kelly Ward at an event that took place. Why don't these people ever figure out who they're taking pictures with before? This is what blows my mind about politicians. It's like you might want to find out who's in the picture with you before you're in the picture with them, because I'm sure this woman had no idea who this person was. Okay, that took place across the street from TPUSA. The event put on by the Republicans for the National Renewal and co-hosted by a group called the American Populist Union. Across the street, Carrie Lake, Blake Masters, Kelly Ward, Senator Wendy Rogers, Anthony Kern, Representative Mark Fitcham, and Representative Paul Gozer joined the event thrown by RNR, whose leadership team has ties to Identity Europa. Here they are hanging with Proud Boy videographer Thomas Morales. The American Populist Union is a Groyper group that in Arizona is led in part by an individual who has shared anti-Semitic messages that led to the removal of his Twitter account. So when Whoopi Goldberg stated that they have affiliations with Nazis, was she lying? I don't think so. Groypers are a subset, and now I don't consider them to be white nationalists. I consider them to be people that are chasing clout. But Groypers are a subset of the white nationalist community who often troll conservatives who they feel are not extreme enough. Though loosely organized members of many different groups, Groypers are almost all followers of the white nationalist Nick Fuentes. The fact that Nick Fuentes is now considered a white nationalist by white Americans is frightening to me. One of the main goals of Groypers is to push conservatives in a white nationalist direction. Now, this is the funny thing. Conservatism, as I stated, originally originally was geared towards the recognition, as was progressivism under Teddy Roosevelt, under the ideology and the understanding that the United States is at its heart a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation. Okay? Progressivism was founded under the concept that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant ideal, which favored science and public policies that benefited people, that was what the basis was of the original progressivism. Okay, but Arnold posted prior to the event, so what I'm trying to explain is, if you just push conservatives towards conservatism, okay, and away from this capitalist nonsense, you don't need to push them towards white nationalism. You're just pushing them towards conservatism. And the idea that, the United States, while there are other groups of people, and we accept those groups of people, there's also a desire for assimilation of various groups. My mother's family came here from Brazil in the 50s. They had to assimilate. They were Italian from Brazil. They had to assimilate. They had to speak English. They had to meet certain norms. Now, they remained with their religion. They remained with their culture, but they were acculturated to the larger American culture, the melting pot, if you will, of the United States. Okay? So you have to keep that in mind. So Arnold posted prior to the event that Congressman Paul Gosar, a Republican of Prescott — I lived in Prescott for about 6 months in 2011, it's a beautiful, beautiful area — said he was interested in attending an event called 76 Fest, a gathering of groypers that has included TPUSA speakers, despite many of the people associated with it sharing outright anti-Semitic posts on social media, some from neo-Nazi accounts. What I think's funny, never mind, I'm not even going to get into that. Gosar's office declined to comment on this story. Ward did not respond to a request for comment. Other far-right influencers were present as well, given access, such as Micaiah Jackson, who took a plea deal for his role in the riot at the Capitol alongside the Arizona chapter of the Proud Boys. Jackson was given press credentials by TPUSA, something the organization has done in the past for other local extremist organizations, where he interviewed many attendees. Jackson holds many far-right beliefs, such as claiming FBI agents engaged in psyops should be exiled, and equated the pride flag to the flag used by the fascist party of World War II Italy. Are you understanding this? This person has said that FBI agents that were engaging in imaginary psyops, imaginary, because it didn't happen, should be exiled, and equated the pride flag was similar to the fascist banner of Italy. Honestly, if you are a true third positionist, that should make your blood boil. That is one of the things that really turned me off about the alt-right. Okay? And once I was turned off by the alt-right, I was turned off by the right. And I realized, I'm a progressive. Progressivism is what I believe in. I'm a progressive. I'm a Roosevelt-style progressive. TPUSA did not respond to multiple requests for comment. TPUSA and groypers have a long history, as they have attacked it for not having a truly America First agenda that they see as pro-white. However, the organization has lately been using the phrase and terminology much more often. The phrase America First was used as far back as 1896 by President William McKinley, but it became prominent in isolationist and xenophobic circles in the 1920s. When the Ku Klux Klan adopted the phrase America First in the 1920s, it was later promoted by American Nazi sympathizers and David Duke. the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, would go on to use the term when describing his foreign policy platform as a U.S. Senate candidate. America First has now become the rallying cry for white nationalists. So Charlie Kirk was the founder of TPUSA, Turning Point USA, and he says not everyone in the Capitol was an insurrectionist. Charlie Kirk, the founder of the conservative student group Turning Point USA, has rejected the argument that everyone who entered the Capitol last week was an insurrectionist, saying that many of those taking part were merely showing bad judgment. A video of Kirk, a Newsweek columnist, discussing the deadly event in which far-right extremists and QAnon conspiracy theorists stormed Congress was shared on Twitter, where it went viral with over 500,000 views at the time of writing. The clip, shared by Media Matters news director John Whitehouse, juxtaposes Kirk speaking on the Charlie Kirk Show on Monday with separate footage of protesters violently beating a Capitol police officer. I guess they were just showing poor judgment. A police officer was among the 5 people who died during the disorder. Among those seen inside the Senate chamber was a person carrying plastic zip ties, with many believing they were brought in order to take hostages. Makeshift nooses and guillotines were also spotted at the Washington protest on January 6th. During the clip, Kirk said that while it was not wise to climb the Capitol steps and enter the rotunda, it is wrong to compare those who did this to terrorists. Now, people know my views on Black Lives Matter, my views on the riots that Black Lives Matter committed, my view on the fact that Black Lives Matter set pretty much every major city on fire, that they took. Now, I call Black Lives Matter terrorists for violently taking over state houses. What do you call people that violently take over the State House and the Capitol? Should you not call them terrorists? I call BLMers terrorists. I also call these people terrorists. Why can't this gentleman call them terrorists? I'm hoping that he agrees with me that the BLMers were terrorists. Okay? Because this sounds like the same load of crap with mostly peaceful protesters. How can you be a mostly peaceful protester if you're taking part in an insurrection like the BLMers did, like the January 6th rioters did? You can't. You are participating in an act of insurrection. I hope this gentleman realizes that he misspoke and that he sounds like an idiot. Speaking of true conservatives, Ann Coulter was excluded from speakers at CPAC. Author and conservative firebrand Ann Coulter was not invited to speak at this year's Conservative Political Action Conference, marking the first time in several years that she was not scheduled to attend in an official capacity. Coulter is usually a popular speaker. Yeah, because she's a fucking conservative. Okay? At the annual conference, when you're not allowing conservatives to speak at a conservative thing, but you're allowing people like Donald Trump to, and I'm going to show you what Donald Trump had to say, and then I'm going to show you what Hillary Clinton had to say on the same topic. Ann Coulter said, I wasn't invited. Coulter confirmed in an email Thursday to the Washington Examiner media desk, I might just show up anyway just to piss them off. I could be the Bibi Netanyahu of CPAC. The Netanyahu mention is reference to a controversial invite from congressional Republicans to the Israeli Prime Minister to address Congress. What's interesting about that is Ann Coulter thought it was absolutely absurd that our Republicans are prostrating themselves to a foreign leader like Benjamin Netanyahu. People need to understand that for context. Why? Because Ann Coulter is an actual conservative. So, let's look at Trump's speech at CPAC and see where they quit inviting conservatives. This was the beginning of the end of the conservatives at the Conservative Political Action Committee. So let me get this straight. This is Donald Trump talking about protecting LGBTQ citizens from hateful rhetoric of radical terrorists. Now, what I want to be clear, he's talking about this at CPAC, and what I want to be clear that everyone understands is he should be talking about protecting all Americans. Once more, he is pandering to LGBTQ Americans at a Conservative Political Action Committee conference, which is absurd, where he is cheered by the attendees, which is disgusting in my opinion. Now, I'm not against protecting LGBTQ citizens. What I am against is that he didn't successfully ban people from certain countries. He didn't successfully do very much to increase our national security. He didn't improve our national security while he was president, and that's kind of scary, which was one of the reasons I voted for him. He also promised to take us out of this nonsense in the Middle East, and he escalated things in the Middle East. He didn't get us out of Afghanistan, but more importantly, here he's pandering to the LGBTQ citizens in the Conservative Political Action Committee conference.
That can be inflicted by Islamic radicals has been proven over and over. At the World Trade Center, at an office party in San Bernardino, at the Boston Marathon, at a military recruiting center in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and many, many other locations. Only weeks ago in Orlando, Florida, 49 wonderful Americans were savagely murdered by an Islamic terrorist. This time, the terrorist targeted LGBTQ community. No good. And we're going to stop it.
Now, I am not upset that he wants to stop attacks on Americans. Okay? What's upsetting about this is at a CPAC event where he is promoting homosexuality and capitalizing on the events of the Pulse nightclub shooting in order to promote homosexuality and make inroads for homosexuality into the conservative movement. I do not hate homosexuals. I am not against people choosing to be homosexual or choosing to sleep with whoever they want to sleep with. I don't think that's my opinion. But I will say this, I am not for conservatives embracing homosexuality. Okay? That is unconservative, okay? That is not a conservative stance. And that stance comes from Trumpism or Trumpublicanism.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology. Believe me.
So what's former New York Senator Hillary Clinton's, former First Lady Hillary Clinton's, what's Mrs. Clinton's stance on gay marriage? You're going to find out that Mrs. Clinton, a former Republican, might I add, an advisor to Richard Nixon, is far more conservative than Donald Trump on the LGBT question.
That marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman. I have had occasion in my life to defend marriage, to stand up for marriage, to believe in the hard work and challenge of marriage. So I take umbrage at anyone who might suggest that those of us who worry about amending the Constitution are less committed to the sanctity of marriage or to the fundamental bedrock principle that it exists between a man and a woman going back into or to the fundamental bedrock principle that it exists between a man and a woman, or to the fundamental bedrock principle that it exists between a man and a woman going back into the mists of history as one exists between a man and a woman going back into the mists of history.
Going back into the mists of history.
As one of the foundational institutions of history and humanity and civilization. Institutions of history and humanity and civilization. Institutions of history and humanity and civilization. Institutions of history and humanity and civilization, and that its primary principal role during those millennia has been the raising and socializing of children for the society into which they are to become adults. I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman. I believe that marriage is not just a bond, but a sacred bond between a man and a woman.
Let's compare Donald Trump's views to Hillary Clinton's.
Also announced who is filling 2 top posts. As Roxana Sabiri reports, it comes as protests continue from coast to coast.
In his first TV interview as president-elect, Donald Trump told 60 Minutes he won't challenge marriage equality.
Not going to challenge it.
He plans to appoint pro-life judges to the Supreme Court. Leslie Stahl asked him if he wants the court to repeal Roe versus Wade.
If it ever were overturned, it would go back to the states. So it would go back to the states.
Some women won't be able to get an abortion.
No, it'll go back to the states.
By state? No, some.
Yeah, well, they'll perhaps have to go to another state.
Trump also acknowledged he's relying on lobbyists on his transition team.
They know the system right now, but we're going to phase that out. You have to phase it out.
Also on Sunday, Trump announced 2 key appointments. Chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, will serve as White House Chief of Staff. Right-wing media mogul Steve Bannon will be chief strategist. A campaign statement referred to the 2 men as equal partners. The new administration
And if you look, the president's attitude, which is maybe changing, and a lot of other people, it's changing. So it's a conversation I look forward to having with George, and anything can happen.
Anything can happen. So, George, it's really on you to perhaps change the hearts and minds of Mr. Donald Trump, which would certainly have a big impact. You've said you find him to be an open-minded guy and a very level-headed guy, obviously. Are you surprised?
And a very good-looking guy.
Well, there's that. Are you surprised?
And an opinion maker, too.
Are you surprised that he holds the position that he holds, given how open-minded a guy you feel he is?
You know, I've had this experience with Celebrity Apprentice, and I get a sense of, from the various things that you've done and said, like when I was fired, you did not just fire me. It was a situation of mutual respect from both you and my 2 colleagues who were there with me.
Now, it's going to be interesting to see what, if anything, happens. Can George possibly change Donald Trump's mind after getting fired from Celebrity Apprentice?
Consider that because of Donald Trump, this gentleman, who I don't even know who he is, but he's claiming to be proud to be a gay Republican. Okay, if you're going to say Republicanism is synonymous with conservatism, you're wrong.
Who cares?
If conservatism is synonymous with simply accepting that certain people's behaviors are completely normal and healthy, and that they should be able to adopt like heterosexual couples, and that they should be able to get married like heterosexual couples and things like that, then there is no such thing as conservatism in this country. Conservatism ceases to exist because they are not recognizing what Hillary Clinton recognizes as the basis of human civilization, which is marriage being between a man and a woman.
Of course, every American has a unique identity. I am proud to be gay. I am proud to be a Republican. But most of all, I am proud to be an American.
Now, I don't have a problem with gays or anyone else being proud to be an American. That's not where my problem lies. My problem does not lie with the gay community. My problem lies with the conservatives that are promoting homosexuality. I'm not against homosexuals being homosexual if that's their choice. I don't care. What I'm against is the conservatives not allowing for any type of political home for people that may not agree with gay marriage. People like myself that don't agree that gay marriage is the same thing as heterosexual marriage. That don't agree that a homosexual relationship is necessarily the best type of relationship to bring up a child in. That's where I'm concerned. That's what concerns me. If gays are proud to be Americans, that's fine. However, if Republicans are proud to have gay Republicans and gays are proud to be Republicans, the Republican Party ceases to be conservative.
That was Peter Thiel, billionaire co-founder of PayPal, speaking to the convention earlier. An interesting moment, and I'm going to turn to my panel here for their impressions of the crowd's reaction as Peter Thiel delivered those lines. Major, what did you observe?
So I think one of the things that you can say about the Trump faction of the Republican Party, which we now know is a very large faction, is they are not as hung up about some of these issues as other sections.
Notice that they are not hung up about those issues, meaning gay marriage, as other sections of the Republican Party are.
Of the old Republican Party. I mean, one of the things that Ted Cruz talked about when this issue of transgender bathrooms, he hit that issue relentlessly to very minimal effect. And Trump did not. Trump sort of danced around it, but you could more or less tell whatever he was saying, he was not opposed to it, and he wasn't going to invest any political capital or outrage in it at all. Right. He just doesn't care. And in talking to Trump supporters, they really do want a kind of core reductionist to things that matter most in their lives. What are my wages? What is my economic future? And what is my security? And that's basically it. Anything else that is used as a more commonly deployed wedge issue doesn't really cut it for them. And and I thought the reaction tonight to both Peter Thiel and then what Trump himself said about the LGBTQ community reflected that.
Let's go ahead and actually play that for our viewers, and then let's talk about that. This was
Pay very special attention to what Trump says on this issue and compare that to what Hillary Clinton said.
Moment during Donald Trump's speech. Let's take a listen.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology. Believe me.
Keep in mind, this is a pro-gay Trump rally. Let's hear what Tiffany Trump has to say.
As for the Republican nomination, I can say I was a little bit worried just based on previous, the past Republican establishment and how, their views maybe were towards this community, towards gays, lesbians. But guess what? My dad cannot be bought off. He's not going to let anyone change his views, and he's done that. And I pray that you all see that. Like, I'm here speaking. I wouldn't lie to you. I promise. I wouldn't. I was texting all my friends. It was last minute, and Rick told me he's doing this event. I said, "What? Trump Pride? I have to go. This is like the first coalition under Republicans for Pride. I'm so excited."
Let's hear that again.
First coalition under Republicans for Pride. I'm so excited. Go. This is like the first coalition under Republicans for Pride. I'm so. I said, "What? Trump Pride? I have to go. This is like the first coalition under Republicans for Pride. I'm so." I said, "What? Trump Pride? I have to go. This is like the first coalition under Republicans for Pride. I'm so excited." fit in that category of the educated young woman, category. It's hard to speak. A lot of us are silenced, or a lot of us feel as though, oh no, if I say this, then
When, since the 1970s, and probably the 1950s, have educated young women been silenced? When? Educated young women are encouraged to speak, are encouraged to rock the vote, are encouraged to pollute the political system of this country with nonsense. And they have. And they have. So, what I want to know, again, when have educated young women been silenced in this country?
as a young, fit in that category of the educated young woman, category, it's hard to speak. A lot of us are silenced, or a lot of us feel as though, oh no, if I say this, then I'm accused of this. But what I've learned, when you don't speak and you do remain silent, and I used to think that was a strength, but when you don't, they create their own narrative. The narrative that they want to sell to the world, and they've created that about me. So now I'm here to speak to you because I've educated myself. I understand.
Educated young female American, aka regurgitating liberal horseshit. That's all it is. Now, there are independent thinkers. There are young women that are independent thinkers. But that's very rare. I don't care if somebody independently decides that they support gay rights. I support gay rights to a certain extent, in the sense that I do not think that being homosexual should be illegal, as long as it's taking place between adults. I do not believe that people should be persecuted for being homosexuals. But I do believe in traditional marriage. I do believe that traditional heterosexual relationships are the basis of Western civilization, and pretty much every civilized civilization, higher civilization, and most primitive civilizations are based off of the concept of a heterosexual marriage, going back to the mists of history, as Hillary Clinton said.
And what I believe in now, because I'm not going to speak about politics or policies until I have my own beliefs. And guess what? I'm here.
She's not going to speak about politics or policies because she obviously doesn't understand them, because she's an educated young woman, which is code for she's been pumped full of liberal, dogmatic nonsense and let loose on society.
Standing here for a reason, and people can say whatever they want to say, but I'm here because I support my father. He supports all of you, and we are here to fight for equality, democracy, to keep America and make it better. Yes, Trumptards! Father, he supports all of you, and we are here. Father, he supports.
Keep that in mind, okay? He supports all of you. All of the LGBTQ community, okay? Keep that in mind, because what I want people to understand, all of these Trump supporters that are against the LGBTQ community, keep in mind, your president, the guy that you want to re-elect, he supports all of them. Not some of them, all of them. Just like when he let criminals out of prison, he supported all of them, including the ones that are turning our society upside down.
Towards all of you, and we are here to fight for equality, democracy, to keep America and make it better.
Keep that in mind. Equality and democracy. Equality and democracy, okay? Let's keep that in mind, because if you are a constitutional Republican, if you believe in republicanism, you know goddamn well that this is a constitutional republic, not a democracy. We don't have a history of democracy or any shit like that. We have a history of being a constitutional republic. One more time. He supports equality and democracy. Equality and democracy. Let's keep that in mind. I don't think that equality is necessarily the best word. The reason why I don't think it's the best word is because not everyone should be treated equally. Do you think criminals should be treated equally to non-criminals? Probably not. Oh, it's Adonis Paul trying to notify me as to some nonsense. Yeah, this is how they harass me. They're trying to notify me to get me to react to their sad crap. But let's go on. Let's go on here. Equality. Also, what's funny about that, Adonis Paul claims to be on vacation scoring in Mexico. Clearly he's not. But equality and democracy to keep America and make America better. Okay, America is not good the way it is? America somehow isn't good enough the way it is?
Equality, democracy, to keep America and make it better. Yes. Equality, democracy, to keep America and make it better. Yes.
What's wrong with America? These are conservatives? Tell me what's wrong with America. I can tell you what's wrong with America, but it's not America that's wrong with America.
And I'm here to tell you Donald Trump is 100% with us. He loves the support from gays and lesbians and asks me. And I'm here to tell you Donald Trump is 100% with us. Donald Trump is 100% with us. Donald Trump is 100% with us. He loves the support from gays and lesbians and is 100% with us. He loves the support from gays and lesbians and is 100% with us. He loves the support from gays and lesbians and asks me pretty regularly, how we doing with gays and lesbians? Support from gays and lesbians and asks me pretty regularly, how we doing with gays and support from gays and lesbians and asks me pretty regularly, how we doing with gays and lesbians? Support from gays and lesbians and asks me pretty regularly, how we doing with gays and lesbians? And I say, Mr. President, the gays love you. And I say, Mr. President, the gays love you. And I say, Mr. President, the gays love you. And I say, Mr. President, the gays love you.
So what about my girl Tulsi Gabbard? Where does she stand on the gay agenda?
Aloha Queen Tulsi Gabbard has decided to weigh in on the controversial new law in Florida, the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, and she has completely revealed herself to be exactly who I said she was, an anti-gay bigot who actually wants that law to go even further. Let's watch.
You may have seen in the news recently, or you may be a parent who's experienced how parental rights are under attack all across the country as the government tries to usurp parents' rights and responsibility to raise their own children.
Exactly.
Now, we should all support the Parental Rights and Education Bill that recently passed in Florida, which very simply bans government and government schools from indoctrinating woke sexual values in our schools to a captive audience.
And since I talk like I'm sedated, maybe...
So what my point is here is Tulsi Gabbard, the girl that I supported in the 2020 election, is far more conservative on conservative issues than was Donald Trump. Okay? So is Hillary Clinton. But let's see what Tulsi Gabbard pushes. Supposedly pushes an anti-transgendered bill, which really is her pushing an anti-child abuse law, or an anti-child abuse bill. Oh, I'm sorry, no. This is a different bill. This is her actually recognizing that biological girls are biological girls and that it's unfair for biological boys to compete against biological girls in athletic competition, because guess what? Biological girls are girls. My question to feminists, I'm not a feminist, people know I'm ardently anti-feminist, but my question to feminists is, how are you a feminist if you deny the fact that females exist? Gabbard co-sponsored the bill with Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican of Oklahoma, said the Protect Women's Sports Act seeks to clarify Title IX. Title IX's intent was based on the general biological distinction between men and women athletes based on sex. Title IX is being weakened by some states who are misrepresenting Title IX, creating uncertainty due to hardship and lost opportunities for female athletes. Keep that in mind. So she's being called an anti-trans bigot, an anti-homosexual bigot for recognizing that women exist and that it might be unfair for biological women to compete against biological males. Now, as somebody that has taught martial arts and has helped organize martial arts tournaments and has judged in martial arts tournaments, okay, we don't allow boys to compete against girls. We don't allow men to compete against women. We don't allow the young to compete against senior citizens. And the reason why is because it's not fair. Not because we hate boys, not because we hate girls, not because we hate senior citizens, not because we hate the young, but because we are recognizing biological differences between these groups of people that are very real. Okay? When you are participating or organizing or have in any way involved in understanding athletic competition, it's not based on hate, it's based on a sense of fairness. It wouldn't be fair for Mike Tyson to compete against a female boxer. It just isn't going to be fair. Notice, it was met with immediate outrage by transgender activists and allies. So they're angry that biological men, or boys, are not allowed to compete against biological girls in high schools. Tulsi Gabbard is now introducing a blatantly, this is from somebody, Charlotte, whoever, saying that it's aimed at trans and non-binary young people. That they can't compete against, that's hardly surprising for a Republican. Okay, well the thing is, Tulsi Gabbard actually recognized it used to not be uncommon for women, liberal women, to recognize that women are women. Look at these, okay, remember when Tulsi Gabbard tried to convince us she was an LGBT ally? Look, this is the point I would make. She never tried to convince anybody that she was an LGBT ally that I'm aware of. What she said is that she's not anti-gay. She's not anti-trans. She's not anti-gay. She's not anti-trans. I'm not anti-gay. I'm not anti-trans. Okay? However, I recognize that boys are boys and girls are girls. Okay? That's not being anti-gay or anti-trans. That's recognizing that biology is real, that certain things exist in physical reality, and you're not going to be able to say they don't exist. And just because you say they don't exist doesn't mean that they don't exist. She has previously claimed to support LGBTQ rights. She does, within reason. Within reason. Quite a bit like me. I'm not speaking for her, but I know that I support gay rights in the sense that I don't think they should be persecuted. I don't think that it should be illegal to be gay. I don't think that people should be allowed to hurt gay people or ostracize gay people or things like that. I do believe that private businesses should be able to refuse service to anyone they want, on any basis they want, but that's because a private business is owned by a private citizen. But let's move on.
In standing for, believing strongly in, and fighting for these ideals of freedom and liberty that we hold dear in this country, means that equality, that our laws, our government must apply that respect for every single individual.
Exactly, the laws must be applied equally. Okay? That's what that means. Do you understand her interpretation of equality? That people are equal before the law. Not that they have special privileges. Not that boys can compete against girls because they think that they're a girl.
Means that equality. That our laws, our government must apply that respect for every single individual. For people who choose to love or marry someone, whether they be of the same gender or not.
See, she's more pro-homosexual than I am because I'm not exactly in favor of gay marriage. I don't really care. I mean, I'm not going to marry a gay person, but the thing is, I think it's a slippery slope to the dissolution of Western civilization. Gabbard faced scrutiny for a 2004 remark in which she called the LGBT community homosexual extremists. See, she gets them better than Trump does, doesn't she? She released an apology video because she had to.
In my past, I said and believed things that were wrong. And worse, they were very hurtful to people in the LGBTQ community and to their loved ones. I sincerely repeat my apology.
She's apologizing for misspeaking. She probably believes that saying homosexual extremist was too strong of a word. That's my guess. But the thing that you have to understand, just because she's apologizing for using strong language and hurting people's feelings does not mean that her core beliefs on the morality of marriage and her religious views on marriage and everything that makes Tulsi Gabbard magically goes away because she feels sorry that she hurt people's feelings. It doesn't mean that she's no longer who she was just because she hurt people's feelings. Okay? Do you get that? She can apologize, and she can mean the apology without changing who she is.
Today, I'm deeply sorry for having said them.
And that's all for this video.